Imagine a young girl, blind since birth, her world painted only by the sounds of her village and the love of her mother's voice. Now picture her torn from that warmth, sold like a piece of cloth to a cold, wealthy stranger in a glittering city. Her heart trembles, her spirit fights, but what if her blindness hides a power no one sees? What if her story isn't what it seems? Stay with me, because this tale of Amina will grip your soul and leave you questioning everything. In the heart of Lumumba, Zamanda's shining capital, where glass skyscrapers kissed the clouds and neon lights danced with the stars, life pulsed like the beat of a talking drum. The city was a tapestry of wealth and hustle. Sleek cars purred through wide boulevards, market women in vibrant Ankara wraps sold jollof rice and suya under solar-powered streetlights, and billionaires in tailored agbadas brokered deals in penthouse suites. Yet, beneath the city's gleam, stories of struggle and sacrifice still wove their way, as old as the baobab trees that stood watch over Zamanda's past. Far from Lumumba's glow, in a small village called Kweku, lived Amina, a girl of 16 whose eyes saw only darkness. Born blind, Amina's world was one of sounds, smells, and feelings. She knew the chirp of the weaver birds at dawn, the smoky scent of her mother's agusi stew simmering over a fire, and the rough warmth of her mother Zainab's hand guiding her through the dusty paths. Amina's blindness made her different, but her spirit was a flame that refused to flicker. She sang songs that made the village children laugh, her voice like the clear waters of the Zamunda River, and she told stories that hushed even the elders, tales she swore came to her in dreams from the ancestors. Zainab, a widowed weaver, poured her life into Amina. She worked her fingers raw, crafting Kent cloth to sell at the village market, her love for her daughter stronger than the weight of their poverty. But hunger was a cruel guest in their mud-brick home, and debts piled like stones. The village moneylender, a wiry man named Kwame with eyes like a hyena's, had lent Zainab money to buy medicine when Amina fell ill as a child. Now, he demanded repayment with interest, his threats growing sharper each day. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the savannah, Zainab sat by the fire, her face heavy with worry. Amina, sensing her mother's silence, reached for her hand. "Mema, what troubles you?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. Zainab's throat tightened. "It's nothing, my star. Just the weight of the world." But Amina, whose ears caught truths others missed, heard the tremble in her mother's words. That night, as crickets sang and the wind carried whispers of the ancestors, Amina dreamed. In her dream, an old woman with eyes like polished ebony stood beneath a baobab tree, her voice deep as the earth. "Child of light," she said, "your path is woven with trials, but your heart sees what eyes cannot. Trust the wisdom within you, for it will lead you to truth." Amina awoke with the words echoing in her chest, her heart both heavy and hopeful. Meanwhile, in Lumumba, a man named Chukwudi Okoye ruled the city's elite like a lion among gazelles. At 40, Chukwudi was Zamanda's richest billionaire, his empire sprawling across tech, real estate, and diamond mines. His penthouse, perched atop the Okoye Tower, gleamed with marble floors and gold-trimmed chandeliers, a palace above the clouds. Yet, for all his wealth, Chukwudi's heart was a barren field. His first wife had died years ago, leaving him childless, and his hunger for a legacy gnawed at him. The city whispered of his temper, his cold deals, and his search for a new wife, a woman who could bear him an heir and polish his image. Chukwudi's advisor, a cunning man named Obi, had heard of Amina through Kwame, who boasted of a blind girl whose beauty and voice could charm a king. "She's poor, desperate, and obedient," Kwame had said, rubbing his hands. "Her mother owes me everything. You could have her for a price." Obi saw opportunity. A humble, beautiful wife for Chukwudi would soften his reputation, and her blindness would make her easy to control. A deal was struck, and Kwame's greed set a dark plan in motion. The next morning, Kwame arrived at Zainab's home, his shadow long and sharp. His voice dripped with false kindness as he spoke. "Zainab, your debts are a chain around your neck. But I bring good news. A man in Lumumba, rich as a king, seeks a wife. He wants Amina. He'll pay enough to clear your debts and more. Zainab's heart froze. My daughter is not for sale, she snapped, her hands trembling as she clutched her weaving shuttle. Kwame's smile twisted. Refuse, and I take your home. You and Amina will beg in the streets. Accept, and she'll live in a palace, fed and clothed like a queen. He leaned closer, his breath sour. Think of her future, not your pride. Zainab's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Amina, who sat quietly, her fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. Amina's face was calm, but her heart pounded. She had heard every word, and the ancestors' words from her dream echoed, "Trust the wisdom within you." She wanted to scream, to run, but she felt her mother's pain like a weight on her chest. "Mama," Amina said softly, "if this saves you, I will go." Zainab wept, holding Amina close, her sobs shaking the small room. "My star, I cannot lose you." "You won't," Amina whispered, though fear clawed at her. "The ancestors are with me." The journey to Lumumba was a blur. Kwame drove Amina in a rattling truck, the air thick with diesel and dust. Amina clutched a small woven bag her mother had given her, filled with a wooden comb, a beaded bracelet, and a scrap of Kent cloth, pieces of home. As the truck entered Lumumba, the sounds overwhelmed her: honking cars, street musicians playing high-life tunes, vendors shouting prices. The air smelled of roasted corn, perfume, and steel. Amina's world of quiet village rhythms was gone, replaced by a city that roared like a storm. At the Okoye Tower, Amina was led to a vast room where Chukwudi waited. His presence was heavy, his voice deep and clipped. "So, this is the girl," he said, his eyes scanning her. Amina, dressed in a simple blue dress, stood tall, her blind eyes fixed forward. She felt his gaze like a cold wind. Obi, standing nearby, smirked. "She's perfect, sir. Humble, beautiful, and no trouble." Chukwudi grunted. "She'll do. Prepare the marriage for next week. I need an heir, not a companion." Amina's stomach twisted, but she held her silence, her fingers tightening around her mother's bracelet. That night, alone in a guest room larger than her entire village home, Amina sat on a silk bed, the city's hum filtering through the window. She whispered a prayer to the ancestors, her voice trembling. "Guide me, for I am lost." In her sleep, the old woman appeared again, her staff glowing. "Child," she said, "the city is a web of greed, but your heart is a compass. Seek the truth, and it will set you free." Amina woke with a spark of resolve, though the path ahead was shrouded in shadow. Amina's new life in Lumumba was a cage of silk and gold. She was given a wardrobe of flowing gowns, meals of pounded yam and pepper soup served on silver plates, and a maid named Ifema, a kind young woman whose laughter was like a bell. Yet, the Okoye Tower felt like a labyrinth, its halls echoing with whispers of staff who pitied her and advisers who schemed. Chukwudi rarely spoke to her, his visits brief and formal, his mind fixed on his empire and the heir he craved. Amina sensed his ambition like a storm cloud, heavy and unyielding. Ifema became Amina's guide, describing the city's sights as they walked through the tower's gardens, where hibiscus flowers bloomed and fountains sang. "Lumumba is a jewel," Ifema said, her voice warm. "But it's also a place where people hide their hearts." Amina listened, her fingers brushing the petals, her mind sharp. She noticed how Obi's voice tightened when Chukwudi was near, how the staff hushed when certain names were mentioned, and how Chukwudi's sister, Neka, a sharp-tongued woman in her 30s, watched Amina with eyes like a hawk's. Neka, who lived in a mansion nearby, visited often, her heels clicking like a warning. "You're a pretty thing," she said once, her voice honeyed but sharp. "But don't think you belong here. My brother needs a wife, not a village dreamer." Amina smiled faintly, her blindness hiding the fire in her heart. She remembered the ancestors' words, "Seek the truth." She began to listen more closely, her ears catching fragments of secrets. One night, as Amina sat in her room, Ifema whispered a story. They say Chukwudi's wealth comes from more than mines and tech. There's talk of deals with dangerous men, of treasures stolen from sacred lands. But no one dares speak it aloud. Amina's pulse quickened. She felt the weight of the city's shadows, the greed that pulsed beneath its shine. In her dreams, the old woman returned, her staff pointing to a river. "Follow the water," she said. "It carries the truth." The wedding day loomed, a grand affair planned in Lumumba's largest cathedral, its spires gleaming like spears. Amina was fitted for a gown of white silk and gold beads, her hair braided with cowrie shells. Yet, her heart ached for her mother, for home, for freedom. She began to explore the tower at night, guided by Ifema, her fingers tracing walls and doors. One evening, she overheard Obi speaking to a stranger in a low voice. "The girl is a means to an end," Obi said. "Once she bears the heir, we control the empire." The stranger laughed, his voice cold. "And if she learns too much?" Obi's reply was a hiss, "She won't." Amina's blood ran cold. She realized her marriage was a thread in a larger web, one spun with greed and power. She confided in Ifema, who clutched her hand. "You're not alone, Amina. But you must be careful. Obi's eyes are everywhere." Amina nodded, her resolve hardening. She would find the truth, not just for herself, but for her mother, for Zamunda, for the ancestors who whispered in her dreams. The wedding was 3 days away, and Lumumba buzzed with preparations. The cathedral was adorned with palm fronds and Kent banners, and the city's elite whispered of Chukwudi's new bride. Amina, trapped in her gilded cage, felt the weight of her fate. Yet, the ancestors' words, "Follow the water," burned in her mind. She began to ask Ifema about Lumumba's rivers, learning of the Zamunda River, which flowed through the city's heart, its waters sacred to the people. One night, Amina and Ifema slipped out of the tower, disguised in simple tunics and head wraps. Ifema led her to a quiet riverbank, where the water murmured like a lullaby. Amina knelt, her fingers dipping into the cool current. She closed her eyes, and the world shifted. In her mind, she saw flashes, a hidden vault beneath the Okoye Tower, filled with artifacts, sacred masks, golden statues stolen from Zamunda's ancient shrines. She saw Chukwudi signing papers with men in dark suits, their hands stained with greed. And she saw her own face, glowing with light, standing before a crowd. Amina gasped, pulling her hand from the water. "The river showed me," she whispered. "Chukwudi's wealth is built on stolen sacred treasures. My marriage is a mask to hide his crimes." Ifema's eyes widened. "If this is true, Amina, you're in danger. But how can we prove it?" Amina's heart raced, but her resolve was iron. "The ancestors will guide us. We must find the vault." They returned to the tower, Amina's mind racing with plans. She remembered the hallway where she'd overheard Obi, its walls lined with masks. One mask, carved with a river symbol, had felt different under fingers, hollow, as if hiding something. The next night, while the tower slept, Amina and Ifema crept to the hallway. Amina's fingers found the mask, and with a soft click, a panel slid open, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Ifema lit a small flashlight, and they descended, the air growing cool and heavy. At the bottom was a steel door, locked with a keypad. Amina's heart sank, but the ancestor's voice whispered, "Your heart is the key." She closed her eyes, her fingers moving as if guided, pressing numbers that felt right. The door clicked open. Inside was a vault glittering with treasures, masks inlaid with cowrie shells, statues of ancient kings, and beads that pulsed with history. Amina couldn't see them, but she felt their power, their sorrow. "These belong to Zamunda's people," she said, her voice shaking. "Chukwudi has robbed our ancestors." Ifema found papers, contracts, maps, proof of Chukwudi's deals with foreign thieves. They took photos with Ifema's phone, their hands trembling. But as they turned to leave, footsteps echoed above. Obi's voice cut through the dark. I knew you'd be trouble, girl. He stood at the vault's entrance, a gun gleaming in his hand. Amina's heart pounded, but she stood tall, her blind eyes blazing with courage. The ancestors see you, Obi, she said. And they will judge. Obi's gun gleamed, but Amina's voice was steady. You cannot silence the ancestors, Obi. Their truth will speak. She stepped forward, her blindness no barrier to her courage. Ifema, trembling, slipped the phone into her pocket, ready to run. Obi sneered. You're a fool, girl. Chukwudi's empire is untouchable. But as he raised the gun, a shout echoed from the staircase. Nneka appeared, her face a storm of fury. Obi, what is this? She demanded. Amina's heart leapt. Nneka, for all her sharpness, had no love for Obi's schemes. Obi faltered, his gun lowering. This girl found the vault, Nneka. She knows too much. Nneka's eyes narrowed, taking in the treasures, Amina's defiance, Ifema's fear. My brother's greed has gone too far, she said, her voice cold. Get out, Obi, before I call the guards. Obi hesitated, then fled, his footsteps fading. Nneka turned to Amina, her expression unreadable. You've stirred a hornet's nest, girl. But perhaps you're braver than I thought. She agreed to protect Amina and Ifema until morning, but warned, Chukwudi won't forgive this. At dawn, Amina and Ifema, with Nneka's help, sent the photos to Zamunda's press and elders' council, exposing Chukwudi's crimes. The city erupted. Protests filled the streets, people in Kent and jeans chanting for justice, their voices like a river's roar. Chukwudi, cornered, called off the wedding, his empire crumbling as authorities seized the vault's treasures. Amina returned to Kweku, her mother's arms a haven. The village celebrated her, their blind girl who saw truth where others faltered. The treasures were returned to Zamunda's shrines, and Chukwudi faced trial, his wealth no shield against justice. Amina's dreams grew quieter, the old woman's voice now a gentle hum. You have honored us, child. Years later, Amina became a storyteller in Lumumba, her voice weaving tales of courage and wisdom in schools and markets. She never married, her heart free, her blindness a gift that let her see the world's soul. Zamunda learned from her, wealth without honor is dust, and truth, like a river, always finds its way. Moral lesson, true sight comes from the heart, not the eyes. Courage and wisdom, guided by the ancestors, can unravel even the darkest webs of greed. Honor your roots, and let truth be your light.